take a moment to peek into the lives of inspirational people living the true definition of happiness with author, presenter, personal stylist and coach Moana Robinson, who chats to people who have overcome challenges to live their best life. Moana is a passion and purpose coach and a personal stylist who empowers others to discover their best life and style regardless of age. Here is Moana.
Moana Robinson here from Be Style for Life, and I'm very excited to welcome Angelica Alen to take a moment. Thank you so much for taking a moment with me, Angelica.
Hi, Moana. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited about our chat.
We haven't seen each other for probably a few months now, because we met at Edward Zia's meetup in Brisbane.
I know. And it was so lovely to meet you. And then we caught up again when you came to my live show, which was beautiful. And it was very, very insightful. But we haven't actually seen each other, right?
Meeting up online is almost the same. I think everybody's got used to that now, haven't they?
Exactly. I know. It's really great to connect online.
Yeah. When I met you, I was very inspired by your story and how you've come through the challenges that you came through and what you're doing now as a health coach. And I'll put all your details down below when I put the recording up. But I might just ask if you could tell me how your story started from your first diagnosis, or anything that you'd like to share with us about your challenges and how you've come out the other side.
Awesome. So I was diagnosed with stage 3 bowel cancer in 2018, and I was only 38 years old. And it came as a shock to me, to my family, to the doctors, to everybody around us. And for me, it was very much like that moment of realization of, wait a second, this can't be bad luck. I was told it wasn't genetic. There was no family history. It needs to be more than that. And, all of a sudden I had this realization that everything that I had done from, to that point, it didn't serve me. And it was almost like I felt I needed to learn how to walk again, how to talk again, how to really be myself again. So it was a journey of recovering, not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally. And what I decided to do when I got off the shock of, the first initial 2 weeks of, being diagnosed with cancer was, I'm ready to really conquer this in a way that I'm going to rebuild something more beautiful than ever, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And which is, what on your TED talk, you talk about, the Japanese, I forgot the name now, the
Kintsugi.
Yes. And for me, I felt I was exactly that, like I was a broken, and I needed to glue myself back together. And I was able to do that. I'm very proud to say now in a much more beautiful way. Physically, I came out of chemotherapy after 12 sessions feeling stronger than I had ever been, mentally and emotion. It was all to do with my habits. I started changing my habits daily, and it started compounding into this massive result. My kids were 6 and 4 at the time of my diagnosis, which was very scary. And I'd like to say that, if people are in that kind of crossroad in their health, and they almost like feel like they can't change for themselves, which was exactly what I was. Because, at that time, I didn't love myself enough. I wasn't connected to myself. I wasn't connected to my body. And I wasn't really connected to my soul. And for me to go from that place to start changing my habits, which is very, very challenging, for me, it was very difficult. So I did it firstly for my kids. And I would, get up every day when I was sick, feeling really unwell during chemo, and start changing slowly for them until I could do for myself. And I think, kids are our best teachers, our best wives for everything. And it was definitely, they motivated me to start me on that journey.
I think what you say is so true. If you're doing it for someone else, for some reason, that gives you more drive sometimes initially when you're going through that tough time than doing it for yourself.
Yeah. Especially when you're coming from that place where, I believe that when you have a physical disease in your body, it has come from the mental and the emotion, and it's been kind of brewing for a long time in different planes, and it just has manifested into your physical level. So, it has done that because you haven't loved yourself. You haven't looked after yourself. You haven't given yourself any self-compassion. You have practiced habits that haven't served you. So changing from that place, it is quite challenging. And if you can't do that initially for somebody else, that can be a massive driver.
What sort of led you to believe that you may not be very well? What were some of the symptoms that you had?
Physically, I was exhausted. Like that, there was like, but when I talk about exhaustion, it's like beyond exhaustion. Like I would just pass out on a Saturday afternoon watching a video with my kids. And almost like go to another world. And when I would wake up and I'll be like, oh my God, what am I? And I think there's so many people living like that and thinking it's normal. And that's not normal. Like, exhaustion, living in constant exhaustion is not normal. And I just normalized that because I just wanted to push through it. I wasn't going to go to the doctor to say, hey, I'm a mom, I'm exhausted, and I work full time and all that, like who does that, just weak people. I didn't want to be that person. So, and you just keep pushing through. And then it wasn't really until like 6 months before my diagnosis that I started feeling some kind of bowel movement changes, which was very unlikely for me. But nothing like major. And then it wasn't until 3 months before my diagnosis that I had some bleeding. But, when I got to the hospital and I had an emergency surgery because I didn't feel well, I felt nauseous. That was all I felt. My blood work was perfect.
Oh.
There was no tumor markers elevated. There was no elevation on my white cells. There was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, when you talk about symptoms, there was a time like that I felt, there was something that I said to my husband that I'll never forget. I had a situation at work and I have always had a really good gut feeling. Yep. And because my cancer was in the gut, I used to work in recruitment, and this candidate did something that I never expected him to do. And I would see things like this coming through. And I said to my husband, I'm losing my intuition. This is really odd. Like I never, ever misjudge somebody like this. Mm-hmm. And, it's really fascinating to see like how, our physical, disease affects how, mentally and emotionally. But I wasn't really feeling anything like crazy. That was it. Exhaustion, the bowel movement starts changing. And, mentally, I kind of felt like out of whack, like I just didn't feel like myself. But I had been disconnected from myself for so long that, again, it's so easy to normalize that.
How important it is to stay connected with yourself. And I just find that fascinating that you lost those gut feelings, you lost that intuition, because I'm an MBIT coach. I've studied M-braining, which is all about the head, heart, and gut, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's fascinating that you lost because you weren't well in your gut, you actually lost that sense of intuition and those gut feelings. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Gosh, so if it wasn't showing up in the blood work, so then they did more tests and they discovered.
They did a CT scan, yeah. And they were reluctantly to do the CT scan because my blood work, and I looked like this. They were like, you look well, like there was nothing wrong with you, right? Mm-hmm. And after an hour of just, asking me questions and inquiry, and I said, okay, I'll put you through the CT. And then after the CT, the doctor looked at me and said, oh my God, I'm surprised you're still standing. And one side of my bowel was backed up by poo. Yeah. And the other side, which is closer to the rectum, where the cancer was, the bowel had gone inside itself. And even so, at that time, they said, this could be a polyp, we're not sure, like they couldn't really see anything. But because I felt nauseous and I didn't feel like eating, they even said to me, do you want to go home?
Oh, really?
Yeah, because look, cancer is very hard to detect. I have worked with many clients that have had different types of cancers. It's very, very difficult to detect. I really think that the reason why is because cancer is a disease of the soul. It's not a disease of the physical body alone. And, they were just looking at the proof that was in front of them. Okay, well, we can't really see anything. And in the bowel, because it's a tube, you have to go inside.
Yeah.
So what you're looking at is what's happening outside of it. The blood work is fine. I mean, she's not presenting with any fever, anything, crazy. And okay, maybe if we take this poo out, give her something to, pass this poo, maybe she'll feel better. Maybe that's why she's nauseous. I really think they were just doing the best they could, but because I kept feeling nauseous, and I was taking anti-nausea tablets because that's what they were giving me.
Yeah.
And they start after 2 days, 3 days, they're like, I think we need to start thinking that this is a bit more serious than we think. And I think we need to start thinking that this might be cancer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Then you went back in again?
No, I stayed the day I went into hospital. I went on a Friday, which was an Easter Friday.
Yeah.
And on the Sunday, they start saying, like, I think this is cancer. And do we think that there is a consultant that's coming tomorrow to operate you? It's because I had all this poo backed up on one side, it wasn't safe to let this pass normally because the cancer was right at the sigmoid area. And this was a very dangerous surgery because of all the poo. If the poo went everywhere, I could die. So I was very, very blessed. This consultant looked at my paperwork from home, and he was at a whole different level than everybody else. And he said, this is definitely cancer, and I can operate her, hopefully laparoscopically. And I can remove the tumor and then rejoin the bowel. And then she can afterwards, deal with the poo herself.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. So it was a very dangerous surgery. It was very touch and go. It was a long surgery, but I was very blessed. He was able to do laparoscopy. So I went home, and my recovery wasn't, so bad because it was only, little keyhole in my tummy. And then a month later, I needed to start 12 sessions of chemo.
And how long did you have the chemo for?
So I had some delays. So normally they tell you, like, have it every 2 weeks, because they want to make sure that, they give you as much chemo as I can in a short period of time, but your body can't take it.
Yeah.
I'm yet to meet somebody who can, like, have it, like the protocol every 2 weeks. So I had quite a few delays, especially at the beginning when I wasn't very strong. So it ended up being about 7.5 months.
So what was the biggest difference that you have felt, like change in yourself since going through all that and going through the recovery stage? What's been the biggest change that you've felt?
So I changed everything, and I changed it during chemo. And I think that was the absolutely key thing. I changed my diet. I started exercising, meditation. I did a load of work on the emotional healing that I needed to do. And I had been holding on to a lot of anger and resentment, which, like, if you think about it, when you're holding on, you hold on to your shit. So that's exactly where I had my problem. So I needed to let go of all of that. So I did a lot of inner work, and I was, to be honest, like, a lot of people text me and say, Angelica, well, how did you change your diet? And what did you do? It's not a one thing. I was very, very sick. It was a stage 3B, had spread to the lymph nodes. I was very young. I mean, I needed to change drastically. I couldn't just turn up to chemo, and I kind of realized that myself, and all the research and everything that I changed, I did it on my own because, the doctors were doing the best they could in one side, but I needed to make those changes daily. So the reason really, I don't think that just by changing the diet or just by exercising or just by meditating or just by doing the inner work, the emotional and mental work, I had a massive issue with stress. I was addicted to stress, that I needed to rewire my brain around that. I needed to really change the whole thing. So I really believe when you are diagnosed with something as serious as cancer, and there is plenty of other diseases out there that, it's kind of the same, kind of complexity as it. I think you need to change everything.
Everything, yeah. And there's probably no bigger warning sign than something going wrong with your body. And it's really all about listening to your body, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are diagnosed with something like cancer and you think that you don't play a part on it, I mean, I don't know what else, it's going to have to happen for you to understand that you need to take responsibility. And for me, it was very much that change. And I think you talk a lot about that on your books as well, going from that victim mentality to like, okay, well, I am the person here who is responsible for my life. We all have things that happen in our lives that are far from ideal, right? We all have it. But all the time that we keep saying to ourselves, oh, why do I have to go through this? Oh my God, the poor me. And, oh, but if only, this was solved and that was solved. If I only didn't have this and I didn't have that, all of that kind of noise, I stopped that. And I thought in every situation, I would just look at it and think, what is it that I need to learn from here? What do I need to get, grow from this? What is the message that this situation, this person is sending to me? And I just kept doing that over and over again. During chemo, that was challenging. You have delays, I end up in hospital almost dying. I mean, there was many issues, but that victim mentality that I had led me to cancer. If I kept that going,
yeah,
where would I have ended up? So I think that was the one thing that I changed.
yeah. Well, that's, and that one thing is a big thing. And what has happened from it is that you now help other people who are going through something similar.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your business and what you do?
So I am a health and life coach, and I help people to change their habits. I think we are just literally a set of habits. Everything that we do defaults into our habits. And for me, I got so much success out of changing my physical, mental, and emotional habits that I decided to start helping people, because I feel that there is so much suffering in the world, like I felt, that suffering, that feeling of feeling powerless, feeling that, you don't have a choice, in life, that you don't have the control of your life. That was me before cancer, but I didn't see any of that. And I really, the work that I do and what inspired me to do this, is that I would love people not to get where I have been. You don't have to wait for the crisis. You don't have to wait for the sickness. You don't have to wait for the daring diagnosis to change your life. There are signs in your body, in your mind, that it keep coming up. Listen to those signs and take action and think, this is not normal. I'm getting headaches all the time. I'm getting coughs and colds all the time. I'm feeling more and more tearful. I'm feeling more and more unhappy. All of those little things that we just keep suppressing and ignoring and pushing through it. There is so much we can do by changing our habits.
It is all about not ignoring your physical signs, the emotional signs, and taking notice. I always say this, that it's really about taking notice and learning more about yourself, because that makes you more powerful and have more control over your life. And when you don't feel as though you don't have control, that's when people start to suffer from victim mentality. Yeah.
And I think you're so right. Like, when we talk about that, from a place of having sat with ourselves and sat with our pain, and from a place that we understand what self-love is and self-compassion is, I see that, again, a lot of people, they are so disconnected from themselves because they're trying to numb their pain. They're trying to run away from themselves. I used to sit in meditation to the chemo and think like, oh my God, like my thoughts are insane. Like, how is that even possible that I have led my life thinking like that? And it's so much easier to run away from it, right? Like, why I don't want to sit with this. This is just like, I don't want to sit with my pain. I don't want to sit with my thoughts. I don't want to sit with, go back to my past, go back. It's so much easier to, just run away and keep doing things to make us forget about it, like alcohol, drugs, food addictions, like all sorts of different things, right? Rather than simply sit with yourself.
So do you think that if you led a fairly busy life before that, it sounds strange, but that time when you had to sit there having chemotherapy, that gave you some time to sit? So in a way, that was a blessing,
A
not
blessing.
but yeah.
Yeah. So I do believe in God, and you know, like when I look back and I read so much about nutrition and health and natural health, a lot of people ask me, would you have chemo again? You know, chemo has given me that time, and
Yeah.
chemo has made me crawl instead of walk. It
Yeah.
had really made me, cancer had me on my knees.
Yeah.
And, you know, some days I didn't know if I was going to make it through the night. And there were so many lessons in that. There was so many beautiful lessons in that. And I really hold that time that I spent during chemo very close to my heart, because that was the time that I walked back to myself. That was the time that I found self-love and I found self-compassion. And if I hadn't had that, let's say if I had had like stage 1 or stage 2 surgery, back to normal world, I would have done the same. I would have gone back to being the same person,
True. Yeah.
you know,
So
like crazy, busy, obnoxious, stubborn.
isn't that amazing? Like, I've often wondered, sometimes if I go on a long flight, that is when I do a lot of thinking and a lot of aha moments, and sometimes I get quite emotional. And I think it's because you're sort of forced to be in that one spot. You're sort of captive there,
Yes.
and it makes you sit with yourself and listen to yourself.
Yeah. And, you know, at the beginning of my treatment, my doctor said to me, like, I don't want you to go anywhere that is busy, lots of people. You can't go to school anymore to see your kids. You can't go to shopping centers, can't go to the supermarket. So really, I self-isolate myself at home. Before COVID, there was. And for somebody who loves being around people, I was really scared. I was like, oh my God, what will I do all day by myself? By the end of the chemo, you know, my husband laughs because I say like, oh my God, I just love spending time with myself. And he said, yeah, you're almost like too much.
Oh, that's funny.
Because I would just love spending all that time, because the kids would go to school, he would go to work, and I had all that time for me for once after like 38 years, you know, no more racing around, no more, it was just me, myself, and I, you know, healing and spending time together. It was a beautiful time.
Wow, that's another gift for you, isn't it? It'll make you love yourself more and love your body more.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. I mean, I was in awe by what my body did for me, like in absolutely awe. Like I was just like, oh my God, every chemo session, how do you come back from that? Like, this is incredible. I think what people don't realize is that, you know, we abuse our bodies for most of our lives. You know, we think like, oh, the body can take it, you know, and then when you get in your 30s, you're like, oh, maybe I'm getting old. Well, not really. It's just because you haven't done anything for your physical health, you know, and you get in your 40s, you know, a lot of people have a chronic disease these days, right? So it is about just giving it every day a little bit to your body. The body will give you tenfold back, guaranteed. You don't have to just do everything perfect, but just a little bit that you give, you're going to receive so much back. I believe that everything happens for a reason. I used to love my job, and I actually went back after my cancer treatment, but I just didn't find myself there again. And I really felt this calling to help people, but it was almost like from helping people just with their jobs, you know, to help people with their health and life. So it's still, you know, very much a people person kind of job centered. And I would end up, you know, when you're working recruitment, you end up talking about, you know, their cats and dogs and wives and husbands and, you know, why they're unhappy and what could they do about it. So it was a great transition, really.
That's fantastic. So you're giving people the gift of themselves. Before it was giving them a job, helping them find a job, and it must be so rewarding.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Angelica. I really appreciated you.
Thank you so much, Moana.
Thank you for listening to Take a Moment with Moana Robinson. Remember to visit her website, bestyledforlife.com.au, and book a time for a further conversation.